And welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show on IBM TV and the Batchelor News Radio Network. We thank you for joining us today. Wherever you're listening, we appreciate you chiming in and checking in. You didn't have to, but you decided to do so anyhow. I want to get right to our topics of the day, and with our guest, he is the president and founder of LJC LLC Media. He's a Washington bureau chief for multiple news outlets worldwide. Also, a contributor, I believe, with the Huffington Post. He is Jim Williams, and Jim, I appreciate you coming on, sir.
We're having a cicada infestation here in the area, and I have a feeling that the same cicada that grounded the press plane that was heading to Europe with the president is now causing grief in our broadband. So my apologies.
No worries, sir. We got you on. We appreciate you.
My pleasure.
You being a trooper as you were on another show for me yesterday too.
Yeah.
So, Jim, I wanted to start with the Biden administration, and
Sure.
as you know, on the campaign to Joe Biden was really struggling in the polls until he got the endorsement from the congressman in South Carolina. Name escapes
Jim
me.
Clyburn.
Thank you, Congressman Clyburn, who endorsed him, and then he won South Carolina, and then it just took off from there. And he made promises to the Black community about, I hear you, I understand. This is what we're going to do. We're going to be looking at creating more jobs, more minority business loans, certainly better policing, less police brutality, coming up with different bills, and so on and so forth. So when you look at the administration right now, we're in June, so it's been enough time to kind of gauge some things. And keep in mind, Republicans have to play nice. We'll get to some of those things too. Is he, in your opinion, and according to the White House, sort of on the path of living up to the promises that he made to Black leadership and the Black community?
I think he's making an attempt at it, and I think part of the problem that a lot of presidents, Biden not being the only one, but is that you can make a lot of promises. You can make all kinds of promises, but if Congress and the Senate aren't going to move your legislation along, then you're basically stuck in mud. And right now, once the most important thing, and this is an obvious, but the most important thing is to get people vaccinated and try to get the COVID thing handled so that we could get back to what we all consider relative norm. It's not norm, but it's close. Then it was infrastructure, voting rights. It was he has a plate full of interesting things. The problem is when you don't really have control of the Senate, and you have all the bills that you want with all the agenda that you have, and you can't get the Democrats to pass it, then you've got problems. And right now, Joe Biden's problem is he's got Joe Manchin, and Joe Manchin is just one of probably 5
Joe,
senators.
Joe Manchin should have an R in front of his name, correct, or behind his name.
Well, he keeps going with this. Oh gosh, oh my. But let's in fairness, I'm not, Manchin's taking the hit, but you gotta. There's Kristen Sinema from Arizona.
Right.
There's Ossoff and Warnock from Georgia. Okay, they're not, they want to be involved in this, but they're thinking, well, people back in Atlanta. I mean, he's got some there's no profiles in courage there. Now, what I'm wondering, and this is just me, all right, and nobody called me to ask, so, can't go from there, is that, okay, if Manchin is saying about this, he doesn't want to give her this filibuster, right? He doesn't want to, he'll pass, he's cool with he doesn't like the HR1 bill, but he's cool with the John Lewis voting rights bill. All right, fine. What you do is you sit down, you take HR1, you strip away some of the bill, you incorporate that with the John Lewis bill, and you put it on the floor and you say, okay, Joe, here it is, vote. And if Manchin doesn't pull the trigger on that, then you realize, okay, then he's just sandbagging. You've got to play hardball politics, because right now the Democrats are at the absolute, are pushing themselves to a position where they're not going to have any real deliverables when they get started for the 2022 campaign. And they're going to have that infrastructure package pushed. They're going to have some sort of voter rights bill pushed. They're going to have some sort of crime bill pushed. Now, surprisingly, the policing and crime bill, which is the one where Tim Scott is involved, is not anywhere near what Biden wants, but it may be the only thing they can get passed. And just to, if you don't mind me going and doing a little politics 101 here.
Sure.
When people say that they don't want the filibuster broken, right? Now, filibuster, for those who don't know, and look, you've got a very savvy audience. I'm sure they do. If they've heard before, they can stop me. That means that you take 60 votes to get something passed. Okay. You can make exceptions. And let me go back to the time of when Mitch McConnell was in charge, just not that long ago. It was McConnell who decided to circumvent the filibuster to get Supreme Court justices passed. And he would get, using just the Republicans, he got all 3 justices passed. And so why this whole thing about the filibuster, right? You can do, they can only do through reconciliation. It's a budget deal, okay? So that means it can only be something that has to do with money. So you can get an infrastructure bill that's even somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5, even it may be even to 2 trillion, although I don't think that would probably fly. But you could get that through on reconciliation, which is just Democrats. You could also make exceptions for the Voting Rights Act. You can make exceptions for anything. And part of my problem, or my concern, or my question would be, why the heck, Nancy Pelosi would do it in a New York second.
Right.
Okay. Chuck Schumer, not so much. And right now, I think the problem is that they're thinking that the Republicans are going to play ball with them. Under what planet does it make any sense that the Republicans are going to give Joe Biden a win in anything?
And here's the thing, too, Jim. I said this about President Obama, and I say this about Democrats in general. You put it out there Mr. Magoo, aka Mitch McConnell's not going to play ball, and in my opinion, he's still running the show, even with the 50-50, because I'm not a fan of Chuck Schumer's and the way that he compromised and allowed so many lower court judges to go through for McConnell and the guy before Biden to pass. I'm really disappointed with that. But having said that, make the case. Okay, you already got COVID done. You're the COVID president. Yeah, your numbers are through the roof. Now you're trying to get, from uh, the civil rights bill. I mean, the voter rights bill, the George Floyd bill. You're trying to do all these different things. I mean, to climate change. You're trying to get all this stuff done, and it's going to be blocked. Make the case, push it through. If you could just push it through with just Democrats, and that way you could explain how that will work outside of the filibuster, and then go to the American people and say, listen, this is what we want to do, and Republicans don't want to work with us. Instead of hoping that they're going to work with you. It didn't work with President Obama for 8 years, and it certainly won't work for Biden now. And it's going to hurt him, Pelosi, and Schumer in 2022.
Well, like I said, you've got Pelosi, who is just as hard as Machiavellian as is McConnell.
Right.
If we flip the script and she was in charge of the Senate, in a New York second, she would scorch the earth.
Yep.
And I think what has to happen is you got to bring these bills up and make these Democrats who, like the Mansions and the others, force them to be on the record that these Democrats aren't voting for this. And it's not, it'll be ugly. Okay. It will be ugly. But if I'm also the president of the United States, and look, Joe Biden spent his entire career, I mean, from the time he was 25 years old, okay, in the Senate. He knows that if it were me and I were president, I would bring the entire U.S. Senate, if I had to the White House, or I'd go over to the Hill and I'd sit down and I'd say, boys and girls, whose side are you?
Right.
Are you either with me or you're not? And by the way, Joe Manchin, if we pass this bill, there's going to be jobs in West Virginia that you never had before in your life. What?
And where the West Virginians at? I mean, are they speaking up about? You would think they need if it's black and brown communities, or poor white communities. You want climate change. There is a cultural, or I should say, income genocide, I call it, when it comes to bad climate in these areas. I mean, they build these factories and they don't care about the climate, let alone jobs and everything else. Where are these West Virginians at? I mean, they're not even speaking, telling Manchin, no, we want you to do these things.
My grandfather was a coal miner in Western Pennsylvania. Approximately the mines I had an uncle who ran mines in the Morgantown area. And between the two of them, they ran mines in West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania. My grandfather died of black lung because of the coal dust in his lungs. Okay. These people are among some of the poorest people in the country. And what they're not getting is that the clean jobs that could come through this transportation and infrastructure bill would be generationally life-changing for these people who do not have a job, who think, because Donald Trump told them so, that mining and coal mining is coming back and that there's clean coal. Let me assure you, folks, there is no such thing as clean coal. Okay, it does not exist. We shouldn't be doing what we're doing with coal even now. It's it's like building. Part of the problem with the Republican Party and part of the problem with the Democrats is that the Republicans want us to build fax machines, and we're living in a 5G world. Okay, they're back doing things that are in 1980s and 1990s and cool with that. I mean, when they start saying, well, what is infrastructure? Define infrastructure. And it's like, what, we'll just do roads and things. It's like, guys, the world is a whole different world these days. And the problem is, and this is, I think, the most essential piece of this information, right? Is that the people get it. The people want it. Every poll you look at shows that this infrastructure bill is incredibly popular. That the George Floyd crime bill is incredibly popular. That the HR1, which is now SB1, is incredibly popular.
And you think about that too, Jim. Again, going into the midterms, I mean, again, Republicans play chess. Remember, they won a bunch of seats. Biden won the election. The Dems won the president seat, but they lost seats not only in the House. It was close in the Senate, and more importantly and more dangerously, they lost in state houses across the country.
They got decimated in state houses.
Right. So what do they I just don't understand. Do they not look at deja vu? Do they not understand that not only if you don't get the bills passed, it's one thing, but if they're looked upon and you do the research, those who were saying, I voted for the idiot the first time, I'm not gonna vote the second time, but I'm kind of iffy about Biden and this Congress coming up. If they don't seem like they're pushing and having a backbone to fight for people, guess what? Those borderlines that wanted to go Republican but went Democrat are gonna do what? They're gonna flip back to the other side, in my opinion.
Well, look, I'm gonna. This is not throwing shade on Ossoff or Warnock at all, okay? But if it wasn't for the fact that Donald Trump basically ripped the Republican Party in the state of Georgia to shreds,
right?
The Senate would be Republican,
right?
At this point, so they can thank Trump for that. But it ended up being 50-50, right? And let's go to this. This is why I think the whole concept of the filibuster thing and why it becomes so silly is if you go back, all right, we haven't had a major piece of legislation, bipartisan legislation, passed in this country in over 25 years. Okay, 25 years. If you and now people, it's funny because people come to me and say, "Well, wait a minute. The ACA went through on reconciliation."
That's right.
Okay, it didn't. It wasn't. There was no bipartisan deal on that. So my point.
And just to quickly explain what reconciliation is, so people know what that means.
I apologize. The reconciliation is, again, a few minutes ago I explained that it's a budget process. Okay, it's where you can get things through because it deals specifically with money. Okay, for instance, reconciliation wouldn't work for a George Floyd policing bill because it's less about money and more about policy. Okay, so it's the difference between one and the other is transportation infrastructure is a financial bill. George Floyd policing and the HR1 voting rights bill is policy. Okay, so it's the nuance between policy and money. It's that simple. So we have a tendency of using these arcane methods, and frankly, um, so to just circle back real quick on the point, if nothing has been bipartisan passed in 25 years, what makes you think that all of a sudden, in this incredibly turbulent and incredibly divided world, that all somehow, some way, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are going to run out and say, yeah, well, let's do this. Let's wake up in the morning. No, the Democrats are getting played like a violin here.
That's right.
And Biden has got to, in my opinion, has got to whip this up. And I will say that one person who, if I were in charge of the Democrats in the Senate, gentleman is a senator from the state of Illinois. His name is Dick Durbin. Dick
Yep.
Durbin is very good at this. Dick Durbin is the senatorial whip. He's the guy who gets the votes. I would definitely have him. I would definitely have Dick Durbin. I would have Dick Durbin come over and quickly extinguish the fire that's going on and say, okay, here's the deal, guys. You tell me, what exactly do you need? And because you can give somebody, I could get, I would say to Cinema, right, in Arizona, I'd say, where do you need bridges? You give these people deliverables, right? And when they go out and they start the campaign, they can say, hey, look, we're building this factory in this part of Arizona. We're building this, clean energy process in West Virginia. Give them deliverables, because you have to run on something. If you play around, which they're doing right now, you're going to lose time, because when they come back in September, they've got to put together a funding bill to run the government. That always takes time. That means you burn time that you need to get these other things passed. They could run the clock out to the end of this year. And then you're already, then you are in 2022 starting the process. And you can be sure they're darn sure not going to give you anything in 2022. So this is a mirage if you think that anything's going to get passed in a bipartisan way at all, whether it's 2021 or 2022. And the concept of even exploring it is silly.
It really is. And I mean, there's pork in all kinds of bills. I mean, that's how that's how it works. I mean, yeah,
That's why they call it sausage, my friend.
right. You jump on board. Hey, yeah, you build this bridge, and I'll vote for this bill. Realistically, when you look at this, just kind of going down HR1, the vote is right. George Floyd, and even the filibuster. Of those three, which one you think well, the filibuster, will that go away? And those other two bills, do you think they get passed? If they do, will they look the way the Democrats really want it to look?
Okay, let's start again. I would say the filibuster is going to stay, but again, you can nuance this filibuster, like I said before. Okay, so you can do that. So let's just say the filibuster total won't be gone, but you can take 3 or 4 different pieces of legislation and say, you know what, I'm going to do just like McConnell did, because of course he didn't go through reconciliation to get judges. He can't do that.
That's
so
right.
He went ahead and did it. So he's got the template is there. Okay. And by the way, the guy who did this first was Harry Reid, because he did it for lower court justices during the Obama administration. So it's been done by both sides. The template is there. HR1. HR1 is, there's so much stuff in HR1, right, that really doesn't necessarily deal with specifics of voting rights. The bill, the John Lewis bill, is really the template that Justice Justice John Roberts put out there after he gutted the bill, the other voting rights act. And so I think if you took the best bits from HR 1, incorporated it into the John Lewis bill, I think you would be able to get that passed. So to answer your question, HR 1 2.0, if you will, and the John Lewis bill have to be in some way merged and married together. You're not going to get two bills passed on voting rights. You're going to get one passed. So I would take the John Lewis bill, and I would take the good bits from HR 1 and get that done. So I think you can get that done. I think you can get the other one was you're asking was George Floyd. Is that
George
it?
Floyd? Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't think George Floyd's going to pass, but I think there will be some sort of I think this thing with Tim Scott, I think that's something that they're going to get through. It's nowhere near what anybody's going to consider being any significant policing bill. But again, we have to understand that if you don't have, I mean, it's 50-50. So you're going to get a lot more centrist and watered down versions of everything that is on this agenda. And the progressives are not going to be happy about it. And I get it, and believe me, I totally understand it. But at this point in time, it's whether or not do you want to get anything as opposed to nothing.
And I mean, then you have the AOCs and the and her following. Like he said, the progressives are going to say, "Okay, I'll see you in 2022." I mean, that's really what it's going. And then
yeah,
then you're going to have to pivot.
Play that game, if they play that game, the problem is they'll lose the House and they'll lose the Senate together. Then you're not, one of my favorite, I don't know how many people saw Hamilton, but one of my favorite lines and songs actually from Hamilton is "In the room where it happens," right?
Right.
You can't legislate if you're in the room where it happens. And so, yeah, I get the fact that you're not getting what you want, but if I were, again, nobody asked me, but if I were advising them, I'd say, here's what you do: pass 4 pieces of legislation or 3 pieces of legislation. Show that you've got deliverables. Show that you're trying to do something, and you're trying to do something for the good of the people in your state, in your region. Okay. Then hold this House, pick up a couple of Senate seats, and now maybe they can get to 53, 54, 55, okay, in the Senate. Then you've got room.
Is that realistic?
It's realistic if you've got deliverables. It's not going to be realistic if you've done nothing but become the COVID president. Because as much and as important as it was, that'll be in everybody's rearview mirror.
It's going to be a tricky situation.
Hell,
Jim,
even if they passed infrastructure, okay,
right?
Even if they could get that passed, that's something that is going to put people to work. And that's, it wouldn't, if you're asking me if I had all of these ones to pick, the 2 that I would want to get by in one way or another, one is infrastructure because that's jobs and that's pork.
Right.
Okay, that's a deliverable. And the other's a variation on a theme of the Voting Rights Act, because if you don't pass that, then 2022 you're going to get gerrymandered to death by the Republicans,
which they already went in these state capitals across the country. They're aiming to do anyway.
Well, they've also put 216 different laws on the books having to do with voter suppression in 27 different states. So if you think that the Democrats are going to win when the deck is stacked against them, it's not going to happen.
Right. And that's why the focus they really have to have, and people use that grassroots term, but they really have to battle in these states, because of course it's important to keep the Senate. Of course it's important to keep the House. Um, but if you lose at the governor's level and the state capitals where the Republicans are running all these states, then it's gonna, your life as you know it locally is going to be very, very difficult if you're uh, on the right side of the world, I like to call it, Jim.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I appreciate your time. Before you go, Jim,
Yeah.
let folks know how they can follow your writings and follow you, sir.
Well, by all means, you can always check me on Twitter at JW Media DC. You can read my stuff on Inside the Nation, as well as News Talk and Sports Talk Florida. And if you can catch it on ITV, which is Israel television. You can catch me on France 24, and all in English, of course. And The Vibe, which is in Malaysia. And so we get around, but
Yeah.
we always enjoy coming by. Let me just, I got a quick second here, please. My apologies last night. I had a 7 o'clock, as you know, the president is overseas, and it was a crazy day yesterday, and so I was involved in that, and I only got to speak with Dr. Larry for about 10-15 minutes, and my apologies for that, but it's been a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and maybe next time we'll actually have a picture to show you as well.
That's okay, and I just want to invite you back. My producer and co-host Mark Lee was mentioning that the morning show host here on IBM TV is from West Virginia, I believe. He knows Joe Manchin pretty well, so maybe we'll get invited to be on his show as well to talk about
that'd be a
that.
lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, Jim. I appreciate you. Cheers to you. You be safe, sir.
All right, my brother. You have a good day, and happiness to everyone out there. Be safe.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Jim Williams, always good to have him inside the Batchelor News Radio Show on IBM TV, the Batchelor News Radio Network, WCOM, our good friends there, as Mark knows, and Big Mind Entertainment as well. That's it for us. Don't forget, if you miss any part of the broadcast, check us out and follow us on Facebook at Pad Nation, Pad Nation 2 at Twitter. You can email me with your questions, comments, labachelor40@gmail.com. Rebroadcast along with Mark Lee on our site at thebachelornews.airtime.pro. And of course, join me this evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll do it all over again. Our guest will be Dr. Wilmer J. Leon. Hopefully, Mark will get some time to check in too. And we'll talk some soccer with Andrew Dixon about the U.S. men's and women's teams. And we'll talk some Boston area sports with Nick Anastas of Anastas Media. He covers UMass Lowell in Massachusetts. Enjoy. We appreciate you checking in. We will talk with you very, very soon. And thank you for joining us on the Batchelor News Radio Show on IBM TV, the Batchelor News Radio Network, WCOM in Chapel Hill, Carrboro, North Carolina, and Big Mind Entertainment. Thank you so much.